We're going on a journey today. Buckle up, hold onto your hats, put on your seatbelt. We're going to go on a journey today. We are talking about reimagining me and we, and today we are going to go right on a limb, as if we haven't been already, and we're going to talk about building resilience, mental health, and spirituality. This is a topic that we don't tend to talk about very much, to, I think, our detriment, and it is a big part of the story of me and we. And what does it mean to build resilience, to find a way through when we have mental health challenges, mental health crises, when we find ourselves in a hole and we're not exactly sure how to get out. And oftentimes, it's astonishing to me and sad to me that when people are in that space, it's the very time they don't come to CSLDallas. And yet, it's the very thing that we need. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about not only how do we do that for ourselves, but also how do we do that for each other. Because remember, this is reimagining me and we. Mental health is something that we do with ourselves, but it's also something that we support in each other. And so it's not just one or the other. It is reimagining me and we. So we're going to go on a journey. You're going to go on my first wilderness hike with me today. And we're going to see, I'm going to share with you my experience of that wilderness hike, and I will tell you how much about resilience I learned on this particular hike. And maybe you will be able to relate. So I had always been a ridge walker and a trail walker. I was that as a teenager. I loved doing that. And when I went out to Washington State to go to school, I decided to join the mountaineering club. They didn't have a hiking club, they had a mountaineering club. And then when they started talking about going out to the rock climbing and going rock climbing, I was like, no, not my deal. No, I'm a ridge walker. So they were very kind to me and said, well, you know, when we go out, we'll let you know. And in the meantime, you know, hang around, get to know people. So the first hike we went on, an overnight hike, we were going up Long's Pass, and that's where that picture is taken, is standing on the top of Long's Pass. We hiked back down into that valley, and then we were going to climb that mountain. Now, I wanted to go, but I was very clear, I am not a mountain climber. No, but I wanted to go, so I packed my bags. This is what a 65 to 80 pound wilderness hiking bag looks like. That's not me. I don't have any digital pictures of me at the time, but that's pretty much what my backpack looked like. And good enough, I was young and stupid and didn't realize how heavy it was going to be. Right? And so this Long's Pass is 2 miles up with a 2,000-foot elevation gain. If you are not a hiker, you don't understand that is a pretty good clip, elevation gain. 2 miles up, 2,000-foot elevation gain, yes. And so I wanted to go, and of course I had the combination of my baggage and the environment in which I am walking, right? The inner and outer combined is, of course, exactly what our life looks like. And I had the support of the group. Now, this is getting towards the top of Long Pass. If you can see in this lovely image, if you can see over the first hump, over the second hump, and then you go way down. Between those mountains, that's where we started. Way down. And you can see we hit tree line and got above tree line. There was a lot of scree to walk across at this point. Yes, and I needed all the help I could get. Now, clearly, as I was walking, I was struggling. I can't believe I put all this in my backpack. I was struggling and I was mad. I was mad at how hard it was. I was mad at how much my feet hurt. I was mad at my backpack. I was mad at these people for talking me into this. I was just mad. And I was not very good company. And neither were they, because they were having a good time. And so I decided that I was going to take my time and I was going to do it my own way. Okay, so this is my first wilderness hike, and I'm walking with other college, mostly boys, who are striding down the path with their packs on. They're like, "You coming? You coming?" And I'm like, "No, bye, go on ahead without me." And I give these young men all the credit in the world. They were like, "You know what? That's okay." One of the things each one of us had to learn, we had to learn what's our pace, how much can we carry, how far are we willing to go, and we're constantly testing our limits. And we see that you are testing yours. And it's okay. We'll wait for you. Do not worry. Just keep going. Just keep going. This was the beginning of me learning about resilience, what resilience means. The dictionary definition of resilience is the ability to recover quickly from illness, change, or misfortune. I was feeling extremely misfortunate. And yet, this is what we confront in our lives, right? Our whole theme this year, sacred disruption, change, illness, COVID, all the things that we meet with in our daily lives, and misfortune. It's the ability to recover quickly from these things. And I love this second definition. This is literally talking about something that's material, right? The property of a material that enables it to resume its original shape after being bent, stretched, or compressed. After being bent out of shape because we're mad, after being stretched by something that really is uncomfortable, or after being compressed into a tiny little box that we don't like or don't want to be in, do we have the property that enables us to resume our original shape, the spiritual truth of who we are, to come back to ourselves. Now, I want to be really clear that we're talking about today is mental health, not mental illness. Mental illness really is something beyond that, and so I totally am a big fan of therapy. I've been in and out of therapy since I was 13. I'm a big fan of making sure that, we need food for our bodies, we need water to drink, sometimes we need supplements, and sometimes our mental stability requires certain psychiatric drugs. And these things are all part of the intelligence of the universe, and they are a way in which we can support our physical bodies so that we can find emotional and mental resilience. And so we're talking today about mental health and how our spirituality can really support us in developing a key item of mental health, which is this resilience, the ability to recover quickly from really big, challenging things that we are walking through, and that enabling us to resume our original shape, this idea that we are spiritual beings, that we can move back into our essential self, regain our original shape. And that mental health is embedded in our conversation of me to we. Right? Mental health is not purely a social issue, and it is not purely an individual issue. Me and we participates in us finding our way through any mental health crisis, and we can also be there for others as they are finding their way through a mental health crisis. Now, I find it incredibly appropriate. I didn't realize it when I developed the talk titles for June, months ago. I didn't realize that this was going to fall on Juneteenth. And so again, really wanting to acknowledge Juneteenth today. And for those of you who are not familiar with all of the history, it was organized in Galveston, Texas. It has been celebrated annually on June 19th in various parts of the United States since 1865. The day was recognized as a federal holiday just in 2021 when Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law. Juneteenth's commemoration is on the anniversary date of June 19th, 1865, announced by Union Army General Gordon Granger, proclaiming freedom for enslaved people in Texas, which was the last state of the Confederacy with institutionalized slavery 2 years after January 1st, 1863 had actually signed, Abraham Lincoln had actually signed the Emancipation Proclamation. 2 and almost a half years later, it was the Union Army coming into Texas and Galveston that freed the enslaved people in Texas 2.5 years later. And so this is why we celebrate Juneteenth, and that it is not just a moment in time, but it is an extraordinary opportunity for us to recognize the resilience of enslaved people who have had to find their way in the last 200 years for the entire 400 years in which where slavery began in the United States. And what this kind of experience does to a group of people, to individuals, and ultimately to the mental health of our communities, our culture, and our nation. Do we have the resilience to deal with it? Individually, collectively. And of course, enslaved people, our black brothers and sisters, our African American brothers and sisters aren't the only ones who have history. We all have some sort of history. Most of us, thank God, don't have a 400-year history that we're seeking to be resilient about. But we have childhood trauma, we have family issues, we have things that have been passed down generation after generation. And we have all the ways in which we have individually and collectively been kept from expressing who we are, expressing the truth of our being. Not being able to express who we are and be the fullness of who we are is what creates so much of the mental health issues that people have. Not being able to be fully expressive. And this doesn't just mean expression like talking, right? This is to simply be full out who we came here to be full out, the fullness of our being, and how we have learned to show up as ourselves and in our cultures and in our families, and to be joyous and proud of all of that, all the ways in which that has been eroded or has simply been denied by others or by ourselves, causes stress and anxiety and depression, or it causes aggression and rage and violence, or it causes disconnection, antisocial behavior, and paranoia. These are the mental and spiritual, mental health issues that we have, that we all suffer from or have walked through in some form or fashion in our lives. Recently, you may not know that besides 9/11, there's now a number 988. Please remember it, 988. It is a suicide and mental health hotline. 988. It was instituted, I don't have the exact date, but not too long ago. Youth and adult depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts have been on the rise. There was a huge jump up since 2011 and another gigantic jump up since 2019. We've seen how mental health in sports has really been illuminated, especially they've discovered in individual sports where people, women and men are ice skaters or gymnasts, and they are out there all by themselves. And even on their teams, they're competing with their teammates. How much of this stress is induced by culture, by media, by the devices that we are addicted to, and by the distractions in our lives? Some of this mental health is also engendered by a belief that we are entitled to ease and comfort, and that we have an inability to deal with disappointment and to actually decide to be on the journey of our own lives. We can have mental health issues when we fall into perfectionism or despair, which produces both anxiety and depression. We have stress from performance, achievement, information overload, and a lack of social support. And if you look out at the world and all of the news, and if you're addicted to the news especially, we can fall into the belief that things won't ever get better. Don't leave, it gets better. But this is what we do. We have to look at what is, right? We're not like, oh, everything's fine. Oh, it's all peaceful and joyful. Oh, it's all good. Well, I don't have those experiences not right now. So no, we just look at it, right? We just look at it and see it for what it is. All research shows that this is why community connection, engagement, and involvement is so critical. This is why a positive outlook, cheerful expectation, and hopefulness is important to cultivate, and why endurance, staying the course, and the long-term view is so critically important to our mental health. Well, I will tell you, I learned all of that on this particular hike. All of that. Or at least I confronted it. Now so these are all the things, right? We wrote them, we talked about them, especially youth, people of color, veterans, women, elders, LGBTQIA, both urban and rural, people of all genders and everything. Does anybody, who's left out of that list? The disabled, right? I mean, it covers pretty much the gamut of all of us. And we go in and out of these, and we all have had moments of it. And sometimes we find ourselves unexpectedly and surprisingly in it. Now, out of the pandemic, we're having to many people are having to rediscover their resilience. Ernest Holmes writes this in The Science of Mind: "There is a creative urge back of everything you do, an urge to express life, joy, and happiness, to reach out to everything that lives as though you belong in the universe in which you live, to be one with it and have an enthusiastic zest for living." He goes on to say, "Our nature is such that it is necessary for us to express life, to come into the fulfillment of joy and happiness, and we are disconsolate until this happens." I had to look up that word. That means depressed and anxious. That's what that word means. It is our nature. It is necessary for us to express life. And when we are not doing that, we are closing all of that off. That is the formula for a mental health crisis. Interestingly enough, William James, in his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, he says, New Thought, he calls it the healthy-minded religion. Because it teaches us tools and techniques and a way of gauging with the world that reframes and changes the way in which we look at life, the way in which we take up life, the way in which we hold all of these things, that allows us to discover our resilience, our deep spiritual and personal resilience. And so, what do we do when either we or someone else, we find ourselves in a mental health crisis? So, the first thing is we notice that we're a bit stuck. We're having a bit of a problem, right? This is Nelson Mandela. He says, "Do not judge me by my successes. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. How many times on that hike I had to sit down and talk myself into getting back up again." You still have a ways to go. How many times I had to stop and take my boots off, take my socks off, put more moleskin onto my blister, put my sock back on, put my boot back on, and get back up again. How many times are we willing to continually get back up again? And then I noticed that I was talking myself in and out of the next step. This is really hard, this is really hard, this is really hard, this is really hard, oh my God. And what I noticed is when I did that, it got harder and harder, didn't it? Whoo, man. And so I began to practice gratitude for every step. Gratitude for every step. I was grateful for something, whether it was the moment that I could breathe, or whether it was something that was going on in my household or at home or in my life, right? Every single solitary step to find that place of gratitude, which is, of course, the positive point of view. It is easy to be carried away with ruminating about the past and worrying about the future. We waste precious seconds, minutes, hours doing this every single day. When we stop judging our experience, we become less reactive and better able to tolerate difficulty. Man, I can tell you what, I can talk myself out of sit down and exercise. Starting an exercise program or in the middle of my exercise program, I can talk myself out of it in a nanosecond. This is hard, I don't like doing this. Oh, I think I'll stop. Really, just like that, right? And so finding that groove, reminding ourselves over and over and over again, there's a reason why we're doing this, there's a good on the other side. I don't care what we have to say to ourselves, but to build that positive attitude and that expression within us. I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. Remember the little engine that could? Yeah, that's not just for kids, you guys. It is not just for kids. It is when you are confronted with uncertainty that you truly discover who you are. In that space is where growth and innovation thrive, and where you learn that you are stronger and more resilient than you ever knew before. I seriously could not believe that if I stopped for 2 minutes and caught my breath, that I could in fact get up and continue to move. That I could, in fact, walk at my own pace, and I would still eat up the miles if I would just keep going. I love this quote. I was so surprised when I got to the top. I was stunned that I was there and that they were waiting for me. Be the cactus. Be a proof of unsubmission and blossom under the fiercest environment. Oh my God, I was so amazed that I had made it all the way to the top, and I had talked myself into it. By working on it, giving myself a moment to breathe, not beating myself up for being slow, not worrying about whether or not they were going to be there. So much gratitude began to flow. And what was so amazing is that this group of barely teenage and over teenage boys, they had waited for me. And they cheered me when I got to the top. They didn't say, oh, well, it took you long enough. Not a one. Nobody rolled their eyes. Nobody said a word other than, oh my God, look at you. You did it. You made it. See, you can do anything. 19-year-old boys told me that. This is the we part. How resilient we are may have as much to do with the social milieu and circle of support as it does with our personal strength. Do you see? That's who we are to each other. That's who they were to me. This is what I felt like. I felt like not the woman carrying the baby. I felt like the baby being carried. I was carried by my gratitude. I was carried by my belief in that if I simply focused on the good, I would make it. I was carried by the fact that these people had been so encouraging to me when I said, look, I can't keep up with you guys. There's no way. There's no way I can keep up with you guys. And when they met me at the top, I felt like I could fly. That's the we part. That's what we do for each other. They waited patiently on me. They checked on me on the way down. And then I looked at that mountain as I was standing there on Long's Pass. I looked at that mountain. I said, you know what? No, I'm not doing it. I am not climbing that mountain. And they said, okay. Are you going to be good in the valley by yourself? Are you going to be okay? I said, I don't know. But I'm not climbing that mountain. I'm not doing it. That was my first opportunity to hike alone all day. This is what my day looked like. All by myself, all day. I hiked to one end of the valley up to the lake. I hiked down to the other end of the valley through all these beautiful, beautiful fields along the creek that was there. Oh my God. I thought, I am in heaven. I'm absolutely in heaven. What an extraordinary moment that was for me. Reconnect to what makes you happy and brings you joy. If there is something, I can't read that also. Let me read it here. If there is something that used to make you happy, which you have stopped doing, do it again. Seek to find deeper meaning and significance rather than living on the surface. Don't just watch a National Geographic, which is what I grew up on. Go out there and walk it. I was like, that's what I felt like all day. Like I'm living in a movie. I'm living in all those things that I used to watch as a kid. I'm here. And I would look at that mountain and the flowers and wow. And every blister and every sweat and every time I cried on that hike up, every one of it was worth it for that day. For that moment. It was worth it. That was the next thing I learned, how completely worth it was to endure, to push, to listen when I couldn't push anymore, and to sit and to cry. There was a number of times on that road up that I cried. And then I picked myself up and I walked again. Now, there was two groups of people that they went up the mountain, right? And we can beautifully, I was a ridge walker, they were climbing the mountain, and two groups of people, a bunch went this way, and two of them went that way. And, they said, yeah, we got to be down off the mountain before it gets too cold or dark, so you can expect us, 5, 6 o'clock, we'll all be back down again. Well, the one group came down. They came down at, 6:30. We started the fire. We got the meal ready, and we waited. And we waited, and we waited, and it got dark, and the other two didn't come down. They didn't come off the mountain. And we waited some more. And by midnight, it was a little scary. They didn't come off the mountain. And so we began to make plans. What are we going to do? And this was before cell phones, you guys. No cell phones. What are we going to do? And everybody looked at everybody else, and they looked at me, and I said, well, I'm not climbing up there and rescuing them. No, not doing it. But I can climb out. I'll hike back out. And I'll walk down that road as long as it takes me to find somebody. And they were like, okay. So based on skill level and based on what we all could do, we divvied up tasks. 1 or 2 people stayed in camp. A bunch of people were going to start out in the next morning, try to figure out which way they had gone. And we agreed that if they weren't back down by noon, we decided that if they had slept on the mountain, they should be down by noon. If they weren't down by noon, I would have my stuff packed, and I would hike out alone, back up over Long's Pass, down the other side, and I would simply walk out until I found somebody. who could then take us to a ranger station. It happened that fast. That fast it happened that everything had changed. What we did that whole time sitting around the campfire is we reassured ourselves they were good climbers. They had their day pack, which did have the 10 essentials. They didn't have any wood up there on the mountain to get a fire, but they had everything else they needed. And we talked about how much it was important that we were there and that we would do everything that it took to get them off that mountain safely. Resilience is a sense of applied optimism. We simply didn't allow ourselves to become afraid. We did not tell stories about what might have happened. We did not talk about what is the worst thing that could have happened. What we talked about is these are good climbers. They're not stupid. They will have stopped when it got dark. They will have found a place to bivouac. They will be okay. Hope. Hope is our middle name. And we have to do that. We have to keep ourselves in focus, in check, no matter what. We have to continually remind ourselves that we are resilient, that we have the infinite power of the universe behind us, that we have an energy we can plug into, an intelligence we can rely on, something that is bigger and larger than we are, and we have each other. Resilience, the ability to recover quickly from illness, change, or misfortune. The property of a material that enables it to resume its original shape after being bent, stretched, or compressed. My bag was packed. 11:45, the two of them walked into camp. What a moment. We hugged and cried and laughed, and here's what they told us. We just tried to stay calm. We supported each other. We worked to stay positive even though we were scared. They found a ledge. They curled up together. They told each other stories, fun adventures they'd had, all with a happy ending. They didn't berate themselves for getting lost. They didn't berate themselves for splitting up from the group. They didn't berate themselves for having gotten stuck on the mountain. They worked hard to keep each other's courage up, to support each other while they were on this little bitty ledge way up there. They'd gotten lost coming down. It's a much harder route that they were trying, and they'd gotten lost coming down, and they had gotten stuck up there. And then sure enough, when the sun came up, they picked their way like little mountain goats. They picked their way from one boulder to the next, from one scree field to the next, carefully and quietly down the side of the mountain. And they walked in there to our camp at 11:45, and they said, "We knew you would be here, and we knew that you would have a plan." That was the other thing they trusted. They trusted that we would have a plan, that we wouldn't leave them there stupidly trying to do something, either rescue them or whatever. They believed that we would have a plan. Do you see? It's me and we. It's my inner and my outer, and it's also the inner experience that we're having and the outer collective that helps us to return to our original shape. And nobody berated them. Why did you have to take the hard road? Why couldn't you go with the rest of us? Why did you have to go be blah, 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 why, right? Nobody did any of that. It was really an extraordinary moment for me, an amazing learning experience, which I have counted on to this very day. I still use these things I learned on that hike. For ourselves, feel the feeling. You got to feel the feeling. It's not going to go away. And if we stop feeling the feeling, we're just pretending. Share. I'm scared. I can't do it. I just don't know. Oh my gosh, this is really hard. Share it. Then reframe it. Reframe it. Take responsibility to reframe it. So I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to, I'm going to be okay. Whatever it is, reframe it. Watch your attitude. I learned that my attitude of gratitude got me up that mountain. And remember that it's a journey. Our lives are a journey. It's not about a destination. We're not going to arrive at bliss and happiness and it's never going to change again. Right? That's the nature of the human experience. It's the nature of life itself. Change, 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 change. Thank you, Kirby and Ziggy. Change, 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 change. It is a journey, and we're journeying through all of these changes, all of these disruptions. And when we are the other, what does the other do? What do we do? Well, be a presence. Just be a presence. We don't have to fix it. Just be a presence. Just listen. Empower the other person. You're going to get through this. You can do it. It's okay. You'll be all right. Yes, absolutely. Inspire them if necessary, but for God's sakes, don't tell tragedy stories. Do you know how many people when I was pregnant wanted to tell me the story about how awful the delivery was for somebody they knew? How many times have you been in that experience? Right? You've had something going on, and where do people go? Immediately to the worst possible thing they've ever heard happen in that situation. Don't do it. Stop it. Right? Inspire people. Hey, when I was in that situation, I did get through it. And yes, it was hard. And yes, I cried. And yes, blah, 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 whatever, whatever, whatever. And I got through it. Or my friend, or whatever. And walk with the person. Walk with them. Presence. Be present. Listen. Empower them. Not rah-rah. Oh, God, don't rah-rah somebody when they're in this state. Don't rah-rah. But it's that powerful empowerment that comes from your original shape, that comes from your gut, that you know you're going to be okay. And I'm going to walk with you in whatever way that looks, right? That's what our practitioners and our spiritual coaches do. That's what our sanghas do. That's what our circles do. That's what we do for each other. This is why community, remember that whole thing that I read in the beginning? When, with all the mental health stats, research shows this is why community, this is why positive and cheerful expectation are so important, and this is why endurance is so important. Because even the thing we're experiencing and walking through, it too will change. Right? In some way, it too will change. Resilience is weathering the storm. Life won't always be perfect, but there will always be perfect moments if you let them in. No one can take away our inherent ability to choose to see beauty in the small things in life. So every time I sat down on the way up that mountain, I would look at the view, or I would look at the flower, the wildflower, or I would look at the trees, and I would allow it to refill me. I would allow it to remind me of even why I had decided to get on the hike in the first place. Right? We lose sight. We lose sight of it. And it's not just the destination, it's the actual doingness of it itself. That when we stop and see the small things that are beautiful in our lives, we remember what the journey is about. When I was 12 years old, I think the handwriting was on the wall that I would eventually be doing what I'm doing today. I made a little book of inspirations. I took all the quotes that I had ever found in my whole life, and I typed them up. I bound them in leather, made a little leather book, and I gave one to my sister, and I gave one to my mother, and I kept one for myself. And it begins with this quote that is my favorite quote ever, 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 that has been my place of resilience. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue. that counts in the end. The courage to continue. On Juneteenth, we celebrate the courage of our African American and Black brothers and sisters to continue to seek the freedom that should be theirs to be exactly and precisely who they are. Our LGBTQIA brothers and sisters who do the same. Today they're having a big Pride celebration somewhere in Dallas. This is also Pride Month. To our dads who often feel boxed in. To the men who feel as though they have to be a certain way. To women who are treated less than, paid less money. To all of us, every one of us has a box. Every one of us is climbing a mountain. We don't always see each other's mountains. We don't always know how the mountain is affecting us. This is why we're in community. This is why we do what we do together. Because this is an important talk, and we are bringing things to the surface that maybe in New Thought in the Science of Mind we've been a little reluctant to talk about. Mental health has been one of those. And so I have provided a little assessment from Duke University. So if the greeters could come up, I'm going to ask the greeters to hand this out. Maybe you'll need it. Maybe somebody that you know will need it. For those of you who are with us online, Joseph is putting it in the chat for you. You can click on it and download it. It's just a one-page little self-assessment. And maybe it will illuminate something for you. Maybe it will illuminate something for a friend. If you say yes to these things that are going on here, if you say yes to some of them, you may be in a mental health crisis and not realize it. Or maybe it will give you permission to say to somebody else, I am actually having a mental health challenge. I'm depressed, or I'm anxious, or I find myself aggressive or rage-filled. And then we can be the we for your me. Do you see? That's what we're about. It's again, not to say it's like this, it's always going to be like this, but to remember that when we sit together, whoever's having the depression and whoever's standing there in witness, when we're in those moments together and we're being open and authentic and we're letting our humanness show while seeking to live on our spiritual truth, we do what Emerson says, Jove nods to Jove behind our eyes. Love sees love, life supports life, and we find ourselves able not only to enjoy the journey, but to revel in the fact that we've conquered the mountain.